Well, for more on this story, let's cross to Antonio Sampaio of the Latin America research analyst for Latin America at the International Institute for Strategic Studies. Thanks for being with us from London. Antonio, where does this leave the peace process?
Hi. Well, it's definitely the greatest challenge that the peace process has faced so far, because goes directly into the point of whether the FARC will be able to sustain any peace agreement that results of this peace process that is taking place for more than 2 years now. So the attack was carried out by a front of the FARC that responds directly to some of the FARC negotiators that are in Havana. So they either ordered the attack, which is difficult to believe, or it shows that they don't have the kind of control of the rank and file as we previously thought. So that is a serious concern, especially because one of the next items on the agenda that should be negotiated by more towards the end of this year or early next year is the disarmament of FARC. So how is this going to be negotiated if the government and the Colombian society don't have the confidence that the FARC will be able to properly disarm and properly cease attacks?
Won't be able to cease attacks. It's a bit of a strange situation. Does the FARC have a point that it is the government that's been continuing with its offensive despite the truce?
Well, that is one of the most complex items of this process, because the FARC declared late last year a unilateral ceasefire, but it made the very important caveat that it was going to carry out violence. It was going to respond to offensive actions by the Colombian military. However, the recent attacks that FARC, this was not the first offensive action that FARC carried out. There are some Colombian think tanks and Colombian NGOs that have reported some other smaller attacks that FARC carried out offensively. So they ambushed soldiers that were carrying out patrols in rural areas of Colombia. So in these ambushes, the FARC soldiers, they come and they surround the army and they shoot through various directions. So they are not directly responding to a tactical attack by the Colombian army. But the fact that it's a unilateral ceasefire by the FARC paves the way for FARC to say that, look, it was the Colombian army that entered a territory that is traditionally ours. So we consider it an offensive action. So as long as we have just a unilateral ceasefire, there's going to be huge room for these types of strategic miscalculations. And the next step should be, a dialogue on how to establish as quick as possible a bilateral ceasefire. But with the recent attack, I think the political environment in Colombia is a bit toxic, is a bit against any ceasefire from the government.
Just to better understand what we're talking about here, Antonio, we know that the FARC, a lot of their soldiers, their commanders, in the bush for years, if not decades. How much do the guys negotiating in Havana control over what's happening in the jungle?
That's a very good point. So far, we have seen a very good control, which goes against many of the predictions of the government, of analysts at the beginning of the peace process. We thought that the FARC command did not have as much control over its rank and file because in recent years, or even the past decade, the government actions have forced the FARC to disperse and to operate in a very fragmented way. So the fronts operate autonomously, and they don't have, very sophisticated means of communicating with their leadership, the top leadership, very quickly. But since the FARC declared a ceasefire late last year, it was able to significantly reduce, if not totally eliminate, the attacks. But this recent action, especially because it is carried out by a faction of FARC that is directly linked to some of the negotiators in Havana, it is very worrying to see that there are some of these fronts that might not be fully under control. And there's the additional factor that they are known to have huge incomes from drug trafficking, from illegal mining. So this type of economic power, these economic sources of revenue, might encourage some of the mid-ranking commanders to carry on fighting after a peace deal.
All right, so they haven't yet gotten to a durable bilateral ceasefire, you were saying to us. What have they agreed to on so far in Havana?
They have agreed to a very significant point of land tenure, of agricultural reform, which is at the center of FARC's motivation for its guerrilla. 52 years ago, when it launched the insurgency, FARC had this issue of the small farmers were alienated, who were, excluded from Colombian society. They were fighting for these small farmers, for just distribution of land. So this issue was tackled, was the first agreement. There was also the issue of how FARC would contribute to tackling drug trafficking throughout and coca plantations throughout Colombian territory. That was the second issue. And the third issue was the political participation of FARC leaders and FARC guerrilla members in the Colombian electoral process. We don't know the details of these issues, but they are significant issues. And the most important thing is that so far the progress has been the biggest. We've reached the furthest we have ever reached in any of the FARC of Colombia FARC peace talks. There were a couple of other peace talks in previous decades, and this is the furthest we've gone so far.